This is the story of the last men on the mountain and our backpacking trip 76 miles through the Sierra Nevada, from Crescent Meadow in Sequoia National Park to Whitney Portal. We would pass through forests, river valleys, and mountain passes and summit the highest peak in the lower 48, Mount Whitney, at 14,505 feet. We flew into Las Vegas and drove through Death Valley National Park, passing the lowest point in America. While we drove, we shared burdens and trials and prayed for one another as we began our epic week. We had to leave a car at Whitney Portal for the drive out on the back end of the hike. Brian had a hard time figuring out what to pack as we left the car. We also got a view of the high mountain summits that we would be crossing over in just a week's time. And we enjoyed an enormous pancake and meat platter at the Whitney Portal restaurant, wondering what we would look like and what we would feel like when we were in this same spot next week. Then we drove 4 hours around the Sierra Nevada and left our second rental car in Visalia and met up with Uber Michael, a poet, English teacher / Uber driver. He took us to the Lodgepole campground, where we camped the first night and picked up our permit for the backcountry. Our plans took an immediate turn when we learned that the shuttle taking us to the start of the High Sierra Trail had stopped running for the season a few days earlier. That meant an extra 5 miles of hiking through the forests of Sequoia National Park. It ended up being well worth the extra miles as we got to see the largest trees in the world. And then, after months of planning and preparation, we were off on the High Sierra Trail. The first day we had planned to go about 9 miles to the appropriately named 9 Mile Creek. With the extra mileage and the first day hiking at elevation, everyone was feeling tired, but the views were amazing and spurred us on. We got our first view of the Great Western Divide, a mountain range we would be crossing in the following days. We set up camp at 9 Mile Creek. Everyone was more tired than expected, but excited about what lay ahead.
This is day one on the High Sierra Trail. We're about, 7 miles in or so. I just have to take a picture of this trail because it is spectacular. That is the Great Western Divide. We're gonna go up and over it tomorrow. There's Brian, Dan, Miguel. Day one, probably an hour or two from camp. We're gonna go up and over that range in about, 48 hours or so. Hiking along the granite next to a waterfall, approaching Hamilton Lake. Day two, about almost 15 miles in. Dan's up ahead. Just absolutely incredible. Pretty much everywhere you look.
We woke up early and headed to Hamilton Lake. Along the way, we passed by Bear Paw Meadow, the site of an abandoned camp originally established by the men who built this trail over 100 years ago. We stopped there for lunch and had some time of prayer and Bible study using some camp chairs that were sitting outside the National Park Ranger's cabin. From this point, we continued upward and left the forest behind for the high mountains.
Here we are, Hamilton Creek, coming out of Hamilton Lake just above us. Day two, High Sierra Trail, just on top of a little waterfall, no big deal. Get a little water stop. Got a final push to our campsite this evening. And just incredible views everywhere you look. Trail that goes up right there. And then we will be at our home for the evening.
Hamilton Lake was incredible. We got to a site sheltered in some rocks just above the lake. We took a freezing swim in the cold waters. That evening, we enjoyed using a nearby bear box as a cooking and dining table. This was also our first encounter with Yukon Dave, who approached our campsite looking for matches. Little did we know he would have a part to play in the rest of our journey on the High Sierra Trail, whether for good or ill, before this was over. We woke up early for our biggest day on the trail so far. The plan was to hike all the way to Moraine Lake about 15 miles away and cross over the Great Western Divide. We hiked out of Hamilton Lake Basin. We crossed through a tunnel in the cliffs above the lake. This was the last section of the trail completed.
All right, so a video is not going to capture this, but we were at a major ravine, and the trail goes over there. It's cut into the rocks. Just a big drop off down below us. It's kind of a cliff. And through here is an awesome tunnel. Pretty cool. And it just comes right out here. Out the other side, where my buddies are.
Above Hamilton Lake, we made it to Precipice Lake, which was made famous by an Ansel Adams photo taken in 1932. He called the picture Frozen Lake and Cliffs, an appropriate name for the high lake lined with glaciers. Here we met a family of believers from Latvia and their young son, Ilya the Bold. He asked us if we were going swimming. We said we would if he did, and after his jump from a cliff near the edge of the lake, the gauntlet was thrown down, and we had no choice but to respond. It was a very brief swim. We got out as quickly as possible and dried off in the sunshine on the rocks around the lake. From there, feeling refreshed, we headed towards Kaweah Gap, 10,689 feet, our highest point on the trail so far. From here, we would head down the backside of the Great Western Divide Range. We hiked down into the Big Arroyo Valley and passed by Yukon Dave again. We would leapfrog one another on and off throughout the day. We made our way to Moraine Lake as the sun was setting. It was a beautiful mountain lake, and we had the peaceful campsite to ourselves. The sunset and sunrise at the lake was incredible. It was still and peaceful. We agreed it was one of the best campsites on the whole trail.
We're sailing across the river from Liverpool.
The next day, everyone was feeling tired after a long day on the trail, so we opted to take a relatively leisure pace and camped 7 miles down trail at Kern Hot Springs. From Moraine Lake, we would head downhill into the Kern River Valley. We passed by the Big Sky Parlor, a large open meadow at the base of the Kaweah Mountains. The downhill into the Kern River was steep and buggy, and the river valley itself dropped all the way back down to around 7,000 feet, which is about the elevation we started at in Crescent Meadow. All the elevation we had gained so far, we would have to gain all over again, but the views were worth it.
All right, we're here, Kern River Valley, about to cross over the Kern River. Awesome bridge here. We have stayed last night at Moraine Lake, and now we are headed to the Kern Hot Springs, crossing over this awesome bridge, overlooking the very inviting waters of the Kern River. I think everybody's ready to go sit down in the Kern River. They've got a hot springs there. Beautiful place.
After crossing a bridge on the Kern River, we made it to the famous hot springs. A concrete tub there was created to fill up the hot spring water and allow for soaking. It felt great to go back and forth between the cold water of the Kern River and the hot spring water. Yukon Dave also showed up again and mentioned an intriguing off-trail possibility that left the High Sierra Trail and scrambled up the steep Whitney Creek Canyon. We were all intrigued about the possibility of an off-trail adventure. Yukon Dave said he would wait for us at Whitney Creek if we wanted to join him the next day.
So this is to see a little bit about what camp looks like. We're at the Kern River campsite. So the Kern River, you can hear it going, listen. Hear the Kern River going there. There's my tent, my sleeping bag out there. And so you can see a little bit what camp life looks like. We're making dinner time. There's Uncle Brian's tent, spread out. There is the rocks where we dry our clothes, right there. These gentlemen are making dinner and discussing plans for tomorrow. This is the water filling station. So you go down to the river and fill up your water filters, and they go really slow right now, so you just kind of let it sit there. There's mine filling up right now. And yeah, so that's the water. There's the trail down to the river and the hot springs, so it's very nice. There's Dan's setup, very nice there. And this is the dinner station. Dinner time at the camp. What do we got, Mr. Brian?
Just boiled some water and I'm putting it into Miguel's Mountain House chicken and dumplings.
Chicken and dumplings, very
Freeze-dried.
nice. Very
Stir it
nice.
up.
Very nice.
I'll get it going there. Beautiful.
Dan, what's on the menu for tonight?
Little chicken and rice tonight. Has 500 calories in it.
Very nice.
Yes.
You've earned it. You've earned it. Miguel, I believe this is your second meal of the night, the day, right?
Second.
Very nice.
Go
Good
Devils
work.
today.
This is Miguel's campsite right here. He goes minimal. He does it the right way.
No.
And there's the river in a beautiful Kern River Valley. Beautiful place.
We woke up in the dark and started hiking just before dawn. We hiked 6 miles up the Kern River Valley to Whitney Creek, and true to his word, Yukon Dave was waiting for us. We filtered some water and topped off our bottles, which Yukon Dave dismissed as an unnecessary step. We began our hike up the steep grades of the Whitney Creek Canyon.
All right, it is 9:30 a.m. We are leaving the High Sierra Trail, headed up Whitney Creek Canyon, off trail. Yukon Dave is in the lead, showing us the way. We'll see how it goes. All right, so we are climbing up some gravel and scree. There's my friends behind me. Dave ahead, off trail, Kern Canyon behind us. Pretty beautiful. The scrambling section right here, up the off trail section. Coming up. Beautiful spot.
We often wondered if Yukon Dave actually knew where he was going, but we were committed at this point. We had to do some bushwhacking and scramble up steep scree slopes. Progress was definitely slower and more difficult than Yukon Dave had sold us on, but we were having fun, and it was definitely an adventure. We were seeing parts of the park few, if any, had ever seen. We also got to know Dave and hear about his adventures in the Yukon and spearfishing in California. After cresting the walls of the canyon, we met up Whitney Creek. In the Lord's providence and blessing, we arrived at the creek right at a beautiful waterfall with a perfectly fallen tree that served as a bridge across the creek. We enjoyed lunch at the base of our own private waterfall with Yukon Dave. We continued to follow the creek up the canyon and eventually made it back to the main trail at Lower Crabtree Meadows.
We just made it back on trail. Made it to Crabtree Meadow. Had an awesome time hiking off trail. Crabtree Meadow is amazing. I'm pretty sure that is Mount Whitney. 8.7 miles, 4,000 feet to go.
We camped at Crabtree Meadows that night and said goodbye to Yukon Dave, who declined our invitation for dinner or camping near us. He wanted to be alone that evening, I guess. I think we had worn him out. Goodbye, Yukon Dave. We were all tired after a long day with many uphill miles off trail. Feet were sore and blistered. We contemplated taking an easy day the following day and allow some time to recover before attempting to summit Mount Whitney. But you never know what will happen on the High Sierra Trail with the last men on the mountain. We had our coldest night and morning on the trail. Temperatures fell into the 30s and everyone stayed in their tents as long as possible to stay warm, especially since we had planned on taking an easy day that day. As we all thawed out, we began discussing our route options. Using a logic that really only makes sense on the trail, we began discussing the possibility of summiting Mount Whitney that day. It would be our longest day, with the most elevation gained at the highest elevation, with the latest start after our hardest day on the trail. We thought about it, prayed about it, studied the resilience and hard work of Christ, and then unanimously agreed that yes, we should go for the summit that day. We quickly gathered our gear, broke camp, and set off for the summit around 11:30 a.m., about 9 hours after most groups attempt to summit. We hiked 2 miles up to the appropriately named Guitar Lake, which is where most people camp before summiting.
All right, so we are at Guitar Lake, just filled up on water. Got some snacks, and Whitney is up above us, about 3,000 feet. And we're gonna try and go for it, guys. We're gonna make it.
1:30 start.
Going for a sunset.
Perfect time.
Sunset summit.
Most people are starting 12 hours either before or after.
It was windy as we climbed higher on the slopes of Mount Whitney.
Looking back down into the valley where we came from, there's Guitar Lake, and we are approaching the summit. Somewhere up there, trail kind of switchbacks along this face, and at some point reaches a crest and cuts over to the summit. Everybody's doing great. It's a big day. Here we are up on the switchbacks, about to get to the crest where we cut off towards the summit. And we're just kind of slowly making our way off across this face, going back and forth. We're getting higher. Everybody's doing good. Little bit by little bit. We're getting up there.
The wind continued to get more intense as we climbed higher. Headaches also started to creep in as oxygen levels decreased at high altitude. We would stop frequently to catch our breath and wonder whether we had made a mistake as the hours ticked by. We made it to the trail crest, where the summit trail cuts off from the main trail.
We're approaching the junction, the crest where the summit trail begins. Looking back over the mountains. Come up a long way from down there at Guitar Lake this morning. Long way. The peaks. Oh, well over those mountains where we started. So right now we are unloading our bags. Take out our bear canisters out of the backpacks because the marmots will try to dig through the bags to get to the canisters. You stuff your bags somewhere, like right there, because you don't want to carry those up there if you don't have to, and then we come back and get them. That's the plan anyway.
It was a 2-mile climb to the summit, and we had about 3 hours of daylight left to get to the top and back. We prayed about the decision and decided to press on into the thin air, battered by the ever-increasing wind.
On the sort of summit ridge, just over that cliff, that furthest cliff, is the summit of the U.S.
Slowly, we made our way up the slopes, We passed by several exposed sections of trail with drop-offs several thousand feet on either side. We were fooled several times by false summits, but still we pressed on. And then we crested the final rise, and the hut of the summit came into view. As we took the final steps to the high point of America, emotions were unleashed. This was the culmination of months of planning and preparation, of miles and miles over the last week. We fell down in worship and thanksgiving. We embraced one another in tears and burst out into loud, screaming worship, trying to raise our voices above the howling wind. It was a beautiful moment and the highlight of the trip for everyone. We had done it. In the Lord's strength, we had conquered Mount Whitney. We had done what many of us doubted possible. As we descended the steep summit trail, we watched the sunset on the Great Western Divide. We were the last men on the mountain that day, a place where few ever see the sunset. For a moment, we were higher than any man in America. But our job wasn't over. We still had to make it back down to our packs and head down the other side of Mount Whitney.
Sunset hike here on the summit. Hands in front, leading us down. Pretty windy. Sun is definitely going down. Made it to the trail crest. This is where we cross over Mount Whitney and head down to Whitney Portal. Woo, it's sunset, sun has set. It's getting cold, it's getting dark. We gotta go somewhere way down in that valley. It's cold and dark. Woo!
We marched for over 5 hours in the dark, hiking into the wind and cold, at times struggling to find the trail in the darkness. Our backpacking trip had turned into a true adventure at this point, as we moved into the black night in search for a camp below treeline to escape the cold and wind.
I had to document just for the sake of memory. This is our view on the way down from Mount Whitney. Not much. It's about 5 feet in front of you. There's some mountains over there, and there's some cliffs over there. There's a few lights of some campers that we're making our way down towards. But yeah, this is kind of what you see just right in front of you. Super exciting.
Around midnight, we blindly set up camp at Outpost Camp, just below treeline at 10,000 feet. After another cold night, we woke up and saw the canyons and cliffs we had climbed down in the dark. We were only about 4 miles away from the Whitney Portal at the end of our journey. We quickly packed up and made fast progress on the final 4 miles, motivated by the prospect of a warm breakfast of pancakes and bacon at the Portal restaurant. Slowly, civilization came back into view. We began to see roads and cars and several day hikers who were headed uphill into the canyon. And then we saw it, the parking lot at Whitney Portal, where we had left our car almost exactly a week ago.
We have arrived back at Whitney Portal. Stepping through those gates, and we are officially off the trail. Take us home.
We passed by the wooden gate marking the end of the High Sierra Trail. We embraced one another and celebrated as we took the final steps together. We enjoyed our breakfast and recounted our favorite moments on the trail. We were thankful to the Lord, thankful for one another. 7 days, 76 miles, over 15,000 feet of elevation gained. The march of the last men on the mountain was over.